Gimbels was an American department store that began in 1887. Adam Gimbel, a Bavarian Jewish immigrant, opened his first general store in 1842 in Indiana. In 1887, the company moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and began the Gimbel Brothers Department Store. By this time in Milwaukee, there was a large German immigration within the city, which made Gimbel Brothers an immediate success. A second Gimbel store opened in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1894 when Adam's son, Isaac, acquired the Granville Haynes store in Philadelphia. Their Philadelphia store had about 1,000 employees. At age 24, Bernard Gimbel, grandson of Adam, pushed the company further to expand to Herald Square in New York City in 1910, becoming an immediate rival to Macys. Gimbel's was just one block south from the Macys flagship store. The area in Manhattan was a premier area featuring new hotels, fancy stores and boutiques, and numerous theaters. Their store was nearly 1 million square feet and cost $17 million. For the land, Gimbel's was going to pay over $650,000 a month with a 105-year lease, but instead they opted to buy the land for $9 million. Their location at one time had just under 5,000 employees and about $5 million in merchandise. Gimbel's location lacked fancy architecture and frills that many other department stores during these times had. Gimbel's had a motto, "The customer pays for fancy frills." Being so close to Macys, a friendly rivalry between the two companies happened when Gimbel's came up with another motto when asked what makes them successful. Does Gimbel's tell Macys? The New York store had easy access to the Herald Square subway station, which attracted numerous customers. By closing in 1986, with such access, the store had possibly the highest rate of shrinkage in the world. This location became a shopping mall in 1989, known today as Manhattan Mall. A separate New York location on 86th and Lexington became apartments. In 1922, Gimbel's went public in the New York Stock Exchange, while the family remained a controlling interest. With incoming financial backing, Gimbel's was able to expand further and in 1923 purchased rival Saks & Company for just over $8 million. After acquiring Saks, Bernard's cousin Adam was brought in to control Saks and created an upscale shopping experience in a store called Saks Fifth Avenue. The Great Depression soon hit and Gimbel's expansion was halted. Isaac Gimbel was partially paralyzed after a horse accident whereas he stepped down, leaving his son Bernard in charge. During the Depression, though, Gimbel's did open a few additional Saks Fifth Avenue locations during the 1930s in major cities Boston, San Francisco, and Chicago. By 1930, there were 20 stores and the revenue of $123 million made them the largest department store chain in the world. Gimbel's was known as a one-stop shop that was geared towards the middle class. Gimbel's flagship location offered numerous floors with a high variety of merchandise to make shopping easy for their customers. The Philadelphia store also had an auditorium, television headquarters, and a music center. This store is also known to be one of the first, if not the first, department stores in the world to use an escalator to transport customers to numerous floors. Gimbel's also had a Thanksgiving parade that began in 1920 in Philadelphia to help promote holiday shopping at its stores. Macys started their parade 4 years later. Gimbel's gained a lot of notoriety from the 1947 Christmas classic Miracle on 34th Street that featured both Macys and Gimbel's. The Gimbel's name was also mentioned numerous times on the popular 1950s television series I Love Lucy. By 1953, sales were at $300 million annually. Also in 1953, Bernard gave up the stores to his son Bruce, but Bernard did remain chairman until he passed away in 1966. In 1962, Gimbel's acquired Milwaukee-based Schuster's. Gimbel's peak was in the mid-1960s, and by 1965 there were 53 total stores, including 22 Gimbel's, 27 Saks Fifth Avenue locations, and 4 Saks 34th Street. In 1973, with shopping habits changing throughout the United States, Brown and Williamson, an American subsidiary of British American Tobacco, acquired Gimbel's, which included Saks. In many areas where Gimbel's opened to attract the middle class, these same areas eventually began to lose their middle class population. In hopes of keeping and gaining additional customers, Gimbel's changed their strategy to gear more towards the lower income households and used cost-cutting schemes to compete with popular discount stores. The shift didn't work. Brown and Williamson, who also owned Frederick and Nelson, the Crescent, Kohl's, would eventually also own Marshall Field's. After the acquisition, Gimbels was placed in 4 different divisions: Gimbels New York, Gimbels Philadelphia, Gimbels Pittsburgh, and Gimbels Milwaukee. Each division was in charge of their own advertising and acted in a sense as their own company. 10 years later, with corporate costs increasing, Gimbels New York and Philadelphia combined into one. By 1986, with profits non-existent and seeing even more of a decrease of future profitability, Gimbels was announced to close and stores were sold. Some of the still profitable stores were acquired by many companies including Kaufmann's, P.A. Bergner & Company's Boston store, and Stearns. The Milwaukee store was given to Brown and Williamson's company, Marshall Field's, but later closed in 1997. Gimbels was no more by 1987. British American Tobacco estimated they would lose $175 million by selling Gimbels, but they later eventually sold the Saks Company to Investcorp S.A. in 1990 for $1.5 billion.